Lily hit the ground before she even knew she was falling. Heat rolled across the prairie like a burning wave. Her dress was torn, and the bruises on her shoulders and knees showed just how far she had pushed herself. Every breath scraped like sandpaper, her stomach twisted with hunger so sharp it felt like a knife. She had not eaten in days. All she wanted was water, just one drink, just something to keep her alive a little while longer. When she lifted her head, she saw a man walking toward a well, a tall man with gray in his beard, sun in his eyes, and the slow, steady walk of someone who had lived his whole life under open skies. Lily tried to stand, but her body refused to listen. She slid back against the wooden wall of the barn, her vision blurred. The man stopped when he saw her. He did not rush. He just walked closer with a kind of quiet caution that came from years of dealing with strangers on the frontier. He knelt in front of her and offered his canteen. She grabbed it with shaking hands. The water hit her tongue and she almost cried. He asked where she came from. He asked what happened to her. His voice was low, steady, like he was trying not to scare her any more than she already was. Lily wanted to answer, but the words would not come. Her throat tightened. Her mind spun. Everything she had been running from crashed inside her chest at once. She looked at him. This stranger, this rancher, this man who did not yell at her or push her or threaten her, and something inside her snapped. Or maybe it broke open. She was not sure. In her mind, every man she had met in the last few years had wanted something in return. Food for favors, shelter for submission. Kindness always came with a price. She had learned that the hard way in dusty little towns full of empty promises. From the saloon in Abilene where she had traded her pride for a plate of food, to lonely trails where friendly voices turned into chains, where every kind word eventually turned into a price she could not afford. Then she said the one sentence no decent man ever expects to hear from a starving girl in the dirt. You are going to have sex with me. Her voice cracked, but the words were clear, real, raw, more desperate than she ever meant them to be. The rancher froze, not in anger, not in desire, but in shock. Deep, honest shock. Lily lowered her eyes. She told him she needed food. She told him she needed a place to stay. She told him she had nothing left to offer. To her, this was the only way people ever paid attention. The man stared at her for a long moment, long enough for the wind to shift through the grass, long enough for Lily to wonder if she had just ruined her last chance at staying alive. But what was he going to do now? Send her away? Take advantage of her hopelessness? Or make a choice she never expected from a man living alone on a ranch in the middle of nowhere? Elias did not answer right away. He just stood there, staring at this young woman who had dropped a sentence that no decent rancher ever expects to hear. The wind pushed through the grass. His horse shifted its weight, and Lily held her breath like she was waiting for a gunshot. Then Elias did something she did not expect. He reached out a hand and helped her sit up straighter. No anger, no judgment. Just a steady kind of calm that only comes from a man who has seen too much life to be shocked for very long. He told her to take another drink. She did. Slow and careful. Her hands were still shaking. When she finally lowered the canteen, Elias spoke again. His voice was rough, but not unkind. He told her he did not want anything from her. Not the thing she feared, not the thing she thought she had to trade. He only wanted to know if she could stand and whether she could walk to the house where she could get some real food. The moment he said the word food, her stomach growled loud enough for him to hear. He gave a tiny half smile, not a playful one, more like a man who understood hunger from winters that had already taken too much from him. Elias helped her to her feet. She leaned on him for balance. Her legs felt like wet paper. He walked slow so she would not fall again. Step by step, they moved toward the ranch house. The old wood porch creaked under their weight. Inside, the place was simple. A table, a stove, a few shelves lined with tins and dried goods. It smelled like coffee and old lumber. A man's space, plain but honest. He sat her in a chair and set a bowl of beans and cornbread in front of her. She stared at it like it was gold. Then she ate so fast he had to remind her to breathe between bites. Little by little, color returned to her face. She thanked him. He nodded and poured her a cup of water. Then the room got quiet. The kind of quiet that makes a person feel the weight of everything they have survived. Elias asked her name. She told him Lily. Then she hesitated. She almost told him about the roadside place she had run from. About the men who talked like they owned her just because she was hungry. But the words stayed locked in her chest. He repeated it softly like he was trying to remember it. She looked at him and whispered that she could work if he needed help. Cooking, cleaning, feeding the horses, anything honest, anything safe. Elias leaned back in his chair and watched her, not like a man looking at a woman. More like a man trying to decide if fate had just put someone in his path for a reason he did not yet understand. But what was he going to say next? And more importantly, what part of her past was still chasing her that would change everything that happened after this moment? The noise outside hit the house again. A heavy thud that shook the window pane. Elias moved before Lily could even stand. He told her to stay in the room. Then he stepped into the main hall and reached for the lantern. When he opened the front door, the late afternoon sun spilled across the yard. And there he was. Hank Crowley, the neighbor every rancher in the county tried to avoid. A big man with a red face, a bad temper, and a habit of showing up where he was not welcome. Hank kicked the water trough again. That was the sound they heard. Water splashed over his boots. He did not seem to mind. He was too busy glaring at the house like it had insulted him personally. Elias stepped down from the porch. He asked Hank what he wanted. Hank smirked. He said he heard Elias had taken in a stray girl. He said maybe she needed a real man to look after her. His tone was rough and mocking, the kind meant to provoke. Lily stood behind the door frame, just far enough to see but not be seen. Her hands tightened around the edge of the wall. Her breath shook again, not from fear of Elias, but from the memory of men like Hank. Raised voices had always meant trouble, and she had the scars to prove it. Elias took one more step forward, his shoulders squared. The kind of posture a man uses when he's done being polite. He told Hank to leave the property. Simple words, clear words, the kind any man with sense would respect. Hank didn't move. Instead, he reached out and shoved Elias in the chest. It was not a hard shove, but it was enough to light a fuse Elias had tried to keep buried for years. Hank swung first, and his fist caught Elias along the jaw. Pain flashed white hot and made Elias take one step back. For a moment he tasted blood, and an old memory of younger days came back. Barroom fights, army drills, times when a man either learned to stand his ground or stayed down. He had lost too much in those years to ever choose staying down again. A wife to fever in a winter he still dreamed about. A son to a war that took boys and sent back stones with their names on them. Elias stepped in close, grabbed the front of Hank's shirt, and drove him backward into the dirt. Hank tried to swing again, wild and off balance. Elias knocked his arm aside and put him on the ground once more, this time with a firm fist to the shoulder that knocked the wind out of him. Elias stood over him, breathing steady, eyes cold. He told Hank that if he ever stepped foot on this property again, it would not end with just a shove or a punch. Hank muttered something angry, scrambled up, and staggered off toward his horse. When Elias turned back toward the house, Lily was standing in the doorway, her eyes wide, not scared. Surprised. She had never seen anyone stand up for her like that, but the trouble Hank brought was only beginning. He was not a man who took a bruised ego lightly, and the next time he returned, he would not come alone. Before we continue, take a sip of your drink. Tell me what time it is and where you're listening from, and if you enjoy stories like this, consider subscribing. Now then, are you ready to hear what Hank planned next? Hank left the ranch with more dirt on his shirt than pride in his chest. But a man like Hank never stayed quiet after being knocked down. That evening, long after the sun dropped behind the prairie, he rode into the nearest town with a bottle in his hand and anger boiling inside him. At a dim saloon on the edge of the main street, Hank found the kind of man who lived outside the law because the law never wanted him anyway. His name was Cole Maddox, a tall stranger with a scar across one cheek and eyes that never looked fully awake, like he drifted between trouble and sleep. Cole sat at a table with a deck of cards, a cold stare, and a reputation that made ranchers lock their doors at night. Hank dropped a bag of coins on the table. Cole picked it up, weighed it with his hand, and gave a lazy smile. Hank told him about Elias, told him about the punch, told him about the girl he wanted to teach a lesson, though the way he said it made Cole raise one eyebrow. Hank claimed he only wanted Elias frightened, not harmed, but the way he talked said something different. By the time the bottle was empty, Cole had agreed to ride out before sunrise. Hank left the saloon with a grin that did not belong on any decent man. He had no idea that hiring Cole was the first step toward the worst morning of his life. Back at the ranch, Lily swept the kitchen floor while Elias checked the barn doors. A quiet yard, the sound of horses breathing easy in the stalls. Lily stepped out to hand Elias a lantern. Her fingers brushed his for just a second. A small second, but enough for both of them to feel something shift between them. Not romance, not yet. More like trust. A kind of trust Lily had not felt since she was a child. Elias told her to rest and that he would keep watch for a while. She nodded and walked back to the house, feeling safer than she had in years. But in the dark hours before dawn, the horses began to snort and stomp. Not from hunger, not from heat, from fear. Elias stepped out into the yard and felt the hair rise on the back of his neck. The air was too still. The shadows too deep. And somewhere in that darkness, a stranger breathed slow and careful, waiting for the right moment to strike. What stepped out of those shadows next would push Elias and Lily into the most dangerous night of their lives. Are you ready to hear what happened when the stranger finally made his move? Elias stepped into the yard with the lantern held low. The light flickered across the dirt. He listened. One breath, two breaths, then a soft crunch of boots on dry soil. Cole Maddox stepped out from behind the barn, his shadow long and stretched by the lantern glow. His coat shifted just enough for Elias to see the metal of a Colt revolver at his side. Elias kept his voice steady. He asked Cole what he wanted. Cole said he was paid to finish a job, said he did not enjoy making trouble, but he did not mind it either. Before Elias could answer, Lily pushed open the door of the house. The lantern light caught her face. Fear, but also something else, something stronger. She called Elias by name for the first time, her voice shaking but firm. That small moment made Cole shift his eyes toward her, just long enough to steal his focus. A mistake for him. Cole's hand dropped toward the gun. Elias moved fast, faster than a man his age ought to move. He grabbed a wooden rail from the fence and swung it toward Cole's arm just as the gun cleared the holster. The rail cracked against the outlaw's wrist and the shot went wild into the dirt near the water trough, kicking up dust and the sharp smell of gunpowder. The Colt slipped from Cole's fingers and landed in the dust. Lily saw the gun on the ground and kicked it farther out into the dark, just beyond Cole's reach. Lily grabbed another lantern and threw it toward them, not to hurt Cole, but to give Elias light to fight. The lantern landed close enough to light the scene. Elias caught Cole by the coat and drove him onto his back. He held him down with a strength Lily did not know he had. Cole cursed and tried to break free. He managed to drive one hard fist into Elias's side, hard enough to make the older man see sparks. Elias pressed a knee to his chest and ended the fight with one last punch that knocked the breath out of the outlaw. Lily ran to Elias and helped him stand. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were steady. For the first time in a long time, she was not just running from danger. She was standing beside someone and facing it. Elias pressed a hand to his ribs and winced. Cole had landed at least one good hit. Lily saw the way he held his side and knew he was hurting more than he wanted to admit. She had seen men hurt before, but this was the first time she cared what happened to one. Later, there would be bandages and bruises. For now, there was only the job that needed doing. Elias tied Cole's hands, dragged him upright, and told Lily they were taking him into town. She nodded, climbed onto the wagon, and for the first time felt like she was part of something worth protecting. At sunrise, the sheriff locked Cole in a cell. Hank was taken too after Cole admitted who sent him. As the sheriff led him away, Hank twisted in the irons and shouted that folks like Elias and Lily never stayed lucky for long. Justice was simple that morning. Cold, clear, and long overdue. When Elias and Lily rode back to the ranch, the world felt different, not safer, but fuller, stronger. At the kitchen table, Lily wrapped a strip of clean cloth around his ribs. She asked softly why he had fought so hard for her. Elias said no one had fought for him when he needed it most, and he was done watching good people stand alone. Lily looked at the morning light and said, maybe life gives a person one good chance to start over. Elias told her that chance is only real if you take it. Then he added that as long as she wanted it, this ranch was her home, and he would stand beside her, not in front of her and not behind her. If trouble ever came back up that road, they would meet it side by side. And that is the lesson here. Sometimes the world tries to break you. Sometimes people try to take things from you. But the strength to stand back up often comes from someone who chooses to believe in you, even when you do not believe in yourself. So what do you think Lily learned from this night? And what would you have done if you were standing beside Elias in that yard? If you enjoyed this story, give it a like and consider subscribing. Sit back, take a sip of your drink, and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is right now.